Hey everybody, it's James Tiernan here with a new episode of Friday with Friends. Today we're going to talk with Aaron Bigler from Cross Country Mortgage, and we're going to learn a bunch of different things about what you need to know for buying your first home and talking with a lender. It's not scary, it's not frightening. Aaron's going to break it down for us and make it super simple, and you're going to find this really helpful. Stay tuned for the whole episode. Hey Aaron, how are you doing today?
Hey, good morning, James. How are you?
I'm great. I want to meet Aaron Bigler from Cross Country Mortgage. He's one of the top tier lenders that I use on a regular basis, and he's here to talk with us today about making mortgages more accessible and understandable for your general first time home buyers.
Cool. Thank you for having me, James. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Aaron, tell me, in today's market, everybody's concerned about rates. What are rates doing today? Let's just start with that because that's what everybody's thinking about.
Sure. So obviously, the rates are going up. Right now, I just checked this morning for an average 30-year fixed rate. We're showing about 7.25% for a conventional loan. A lot of assumptions there, but in general, that's what we're looking at. So the nationwide average is going up. Compared to last year, we were talking about the 3s, 2.5, that kind of time frame. So what's the difference? The difference is essentially that the cost of borrowing money is getting higher. So everybody has heard about the Fed and Jerome Powell. And because the Fed is raising rates, they're raising what's called the federal funds rate, or the effective rate to borrow money, that people can get a return on that. So that number is going up. So therefore, it is going up here too. But there is a lot of anticipation in the market that could potentially change with what's called the Fed pivot. Your guess is as good as mine on what that timing is going to look like. But I think the Fed, at least per what they're talking about, seems committed to keeping them high as long as they can. And that's because, that's how we stop the cost of the increasing cost of goods and services that we've seen the last 2 years since COVID.
Yeah, and that's quite honestly a whole different show, right?
That's correct.
Get into that. That could be like 2 hours of conversation of why
I'll spare everybody
I'll
spare the bloody
details. We want to just get into, like, for the people that are just getting started in the market and want to know more about what they have to do. Let's talk about that and focus on those people. And while we're doing that, I want to make sure that we add your information on the bottom. So if you have questions, you want to talk with Aaron directly, his information is right on the bottom of the screen, right down here. You can see it. He's perfectly accessible. I call him all the time. And what I know about Aaron is when his phone rings, if he can't get it, he'll give you a call back as soon as he can. He's a pretty busy guy right now.
Yeah.
So,
well, I appreciate that, James. And I'm one of those types of guys. I don't I obviously want to help people out, but if you just got a normal question about a mortgage or whatever, that, little trivial stuff, that's fine. I can help answer that question. Perfect. So you asked about, just really quick, the process of what it would be like for a first-time home buyer and what to expect. Do you want me to talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah. So for a first-time home buyer, what are they always have a dozen questions, and there's a lot of anxiety, like, oh, my credit score is not that great. I don't want people checking my credit score because it's going to come down. Let's start with that.
Yeah. So, the thing about getting a mortgage is you're asking to borrow, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the lenders need to do their due diligence, which is why we do a credit check, just to make sure that we can have that background on the people that are potential clients. So that's why we do the credit check. It is necessary to get a good pre-approval letter. If you have a lender that's
what scores do people need?
That's a good question. So in most cases, for a conventional loan, let me just put it this way. It varies based on what the automated underwriter for the standards that we're going to follow will be. However, in most cases for a conventional, you want to see a score above 640. And for an FHA, in our case, for our lender company, which is Cross Country Mortgage, we want to make that score be a minimum of 580 or ideally above 600 for an FHA loan.
Okay. So people can get loans with as low as 580.
That's correct. Yeah.
And what are the challenges with someone who comes in with a 580? What challenges do those people face? Like, why is there an additional payment that they get when they're at that credit score?
Nope, no additional payment. Typically, the rates can be higher because the risk is higher to the lender
Okay.
for a default potentially. But the biggest thing we typically have to deal with is that there might be additional rules. So, for instance, the lender guidelines will show that we want to have maybe a few extra months of reserve payments so that they know and have confidence that the borrower or the client in this case can make their mortgage payment.
Okay, so they're trying to reduce their risk because they know there's a higher risk since there's a lower credit score.
That's correct. Yeah, in very general terms, that's true. Yep.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we want to break it down to make it easy for people because it's very easy for you and me to talk about, business lingo, but we want to break it into English for people who don't do this every day.
Yeah, one of the other main things that I typically will have to go over here, and this is something that I didn't understand until I got here, is that there are different types of credit scores. So if you're referencing your FICO score app or something on your phone, you're probably looking at what's called the FICO 8 score or a FICO 9 potentially. I'm not going to get it too much into the details, but just know that mortgage lenders are required to use FICO 2, 4, and 5, which is what your TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax are. And then we'll take the mid score of those between the three to get your qualifying score.
Okay, so that sounds like
that number is different.
That sounds like another show we could talk about, like breaking down the credit scores, because
lots of stories.
I've never done that. And look, I've got a decent credit score, but I don't have a complete understanding of that whole in-depth picture. And I'm sure a lot of people would like that. So that's something we can put on for future plans.
Yep. I would absolutely love to talk more about that for my limited knowledge. The biggest thing is I get everybody's information. I put it in the system. The score that we see is the one that we're going to use because that's the standard. We can't make our own credit score. We have to use what they report.
Right.
And the only reason I know this is because a lot of times you will get a little bit of a mismatch between what the client expects based on what's on their phone app and what the reality is that I'm getting reported from the credit reporting agency.
Right. So there's always a difference between what you might find on a free app. Right. Let's just say there's the one that John Cena with the purple cow advertises, and then Credit Karma, who I understand is being sued for promising people that they'll be approved for loans. So some of those things are not always what they seem. But those things also don't lower your credit score when you look at them. So that's
Correct.
how you know they're not as in depth as what a typical lender looks at.
That's correct. Now, on my side, I know there are a lot of people out there that have this fear that their score is going to go down.
Everybody thinks that if I talk to 3 lenders, my score is going to go down 3 more times, and I'm not going to be able to buy a house.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second because I think it's the FCRA, the credit, there are laws and rules out there. And, there's basically a law out there that says, let me rephrase that. I want to make sure I'm using the right words. I don't know if it's necessarily a law, but the rule is basically that once you have your credit looked at by a lender, you have a window of time. And you can go look this up on the internet, but you have a window of time that's something at or around 30 days or longer where you can have multiple lenders take a look at your credit with no additional inquiry showing up on your credit report. So once you've made that decision in your mind, hey, we're going to go look for a house, know that, number one, if you want a mortgage to borrow money for your house, you have to get a credit check eventually. And
right.
B, sooner is better than later because the sooner that we can look at it, the sooner that potentially we can help you understand what the accurate picture is and if there are any necessary steps to get that to a different place where you're qualified. If you're not already qualified, maybe, I've seen it the other way around where people thought their credit was horrible. We run the credit score and it's awesome, So I like to be a kind of an objective person as far as like, hey, look, we're dealing with facts. Some people, everybody has a different attitude towards money and sometimes
Everybody
there might
does,
be a
yeah.
shame. Yeah, there might be a shame factor associated with having a low credit score. And I can just tell you that, like, we are on your side. My job is to be your advocate. And,
Absolutely.
this isn't, it's like a doctor at the hospital seeing somebody that's sick. You can be upset or ashamed that you're sick, but that's what his job is. He sees everybody every day with the goal of helping them get better. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great
Yeah.
analogy. You know,
Yeah.
people always have this shame about money if they don't have it, right? So they have low credit scores. People often have low self-esteem because of that. And the reality is that's okay. This is
Yeah.
what you want to do, and we're going to set out a plan for you. If you can't do it today because your scores aren't high enough, then we'll help you build a plan to get you where you need to be able to do the things you want to do. We're going to build a plan for your success. That's what I think about all the time.
Yeah. And in fact, just to use a recent example, Brooke, one of your realtors, and I had a mutual client that came in. They had a lower credit score. I want to say in the 580s. I don't know for sure, but it didn't qualify. And in our case, we're not a credit repair agency. I'm a mortgage lender, but we were able to do some things to help them out. We can submit what's called a rescore if they can show that they've improved some account balances and that kind of thing. And we got their credit score to 608. So, I mean, and in that case, they did qualify. You know what I mean? So, so we're there to help. We will absolutely do it. And it takes a little bit of extra time and patience, but I always encourage them to know that at the end of the day, I am your advocate. I'm working for you. It's not the other way around. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's what people need to know. So one of the things I think about is the different tiers in a credit score that get you different rates. Now, this is something that I always knew was an issue on the low side, but I wasn't aware of it on the high side. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the range of credit scores, I mean, in theory, it goes from 0, but mostly what we see is at least in the 400s or 500s, and then it goes all the way up through 820 around there is what I've seen for the high score. A credit score, well, like the only thing that it really does, well, there does a few things, but it helps the underwriting guidelines. They're based on your credit score. They're kind of different buckets. And then in addition of requirements that you would need to provide. So for instance, that reserve requirement that I mentioned earlier.
Yep. So basically savings, right? Money set aside,
money set aside.
Savings amount of money.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah.
Yeah. And that can be in retirement accounts too.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And so the other additional thing that credit score helps provide a distinction based on having a 750 credit score versus having a 720 credit score is going to be potentially the cost or the rate that you get to borrow that money. So in general, sorry. All right. Sorry, just a second. I got to turn something off here. So it's basically the cost of borrowing money.
Yep.
Is higher if you have a lower credit score.
Right.
So if the credit score is higher, then in theory, according to the algorithm, you're a more consistent borrower who's able to pay back money.
Sure.
So those credit scores specifically, sorry, I'm beating around the bush here, but typically 740 and above is going to get that top tier of interest rate.
Okay. So 740 is going to get you the best rate.
That's right. Yeah. So 740 is the best rate. And I'm speaking anecdotally here. I'm not speaking as, the underwriting guidelines for Fannie Mae or anything like that. I'm saying this is my experience with my own clients. Typically in that, 600 to 680 range, the person's going to probably be best served with an FHA. Like, I'm always happy if the person qualifies for a conventional and an FHA loan, I will help them do both things. But the FHA loan's purpose is for those people like we're talking about with less than perfect credit who still want to buy a home as a first-time home buyer. Okay. And that's somebody that hasn't owned a home within the last 3 years. So the nice thing about that is that the government, in the case of an FHA loan, the government will still assure basically they insure the loan against default, even though the person has a lower credit score. So it helps the lender say, hey, yeah, we'll definitely, the government has assumed some of that risk, and we'll go ahead and extend the money to this person as a loan with that in mind.
Okay.
So 600 to 680, just generally speaking, is where FHA makes the most sense, depending on the person's circumstances.
Okay.
For conventional, like I said before, 640 is kind of the bottom, and then 740 plus is kind of where the top tier is.
All right.
In between there, it's just roughly speaking, this is again based on my own observations, about every, call it 20 points. So if you're 700 to 740, or call it 700 to 720, that's about one rate, and then 720 to 740 is a little bit higher rate, and then 740 plus is the highest.
Okay.
That distinction is more like, it's very little differences, and then the big distinctions are usually like 640 to 680, and then 680 to 740-ish, and then 740 plus. So there's almost like, when I look on the pricing for our pricing model and online, typically that's what I look at.
Okay. So anything over 740 is all the same, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
As far as what the way that I put it is, that's that person is going to usually be offered the top tier of rates based on their credit score.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So besides credit score, what are the other key factors a first-time home buyer needs to be aware of in order to get the process started? Let's just kind of
that's a great question.
Yeah.
So first off, I don't want anybody to be too daunted by this idea that we're going to go do a debt to income analysis, and we're going to do credit checks, and we're going to do these other things. Essentially what it amounts to is you're going to call someone like me. I'm going to have about a 15-minute conversation with you. I'm going to get some basic information. I'm going to ask you some employment questions and some questions about what assets you have. So how much you have saved up in the bank. And then typically I will do a credit check, assuming that you have authorized it. And I'll run a debt to income analysis. And what that does is it measures, your monthly debts. So your total debts, student loans, car payments, credit card, that kind of thing. Plus your new house payment, whatever that would be. We have to make some assumptions there. I add all that up, and then it has to be a percentage of your total verified income. So if you're a W-2 employee, so if you just do a 9-to-5 job that you get a normal paycheck for, that's pretty easy. And obviously, as you're starting to think about this, you realize that hey, we actually need a fair amount of documentation to make that happen. So typically what we'll ask for is 2 years of tax returns, the last 2 years of W-2s for all your jobs, 30 days of pay stubs, so just the previous 30 days of your pay stubs. That will help verify your most current pay rate or anything that we're qualifying you on. And then 60 days of your bank accounts for every account. So it's a lot of stuff to give to us right off the bat that we're probably going to ask for pretty quick. I try to make it easy on my clients by doing what's called the electronic verification of income and an electronic verification of employment, as well as electronic verifications of assets. So if you have that same conversation with me and you want to fill out an application online, you can electronically go into this portal, uplink your bank's accounts.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing crazy. It's like we're receive only. We're not going to go in there and do anything to your accounts.
Right.
And that provides all the documentation for us ahead of time. So that makes it super easy for the follow-on team. So my processor and the underwriters, they have that information in there. They have high confidence that it's legitimate, and they can keep it updated and refreshed along the way.
And it's all secure, so they don't have to worry about
That's correct.
Things like that. And there's accounts not in danger and jeopardy, but you're looking at, tax returns, employment, and bank statements, right?
Yeah. So the big three things that I'm looking for are employment. Is your employment stable and likely to continue?
Right.
The assets. So do you have the money to close on a loan, depending on the amount of money that you have to put down and the costs associated with closing? And then the third thing is, sorry, what was I going to say? Oh, essentially that
in tax return.
Yeah, the tax returns, that's part of the employment, but the debt to income analysis is also saying, hey, we're looking at using your credit check. We're looking at the cumulative amount and making sure that that percentage with that debt to income analysis is within the realm where we can get an approval from the automated underwriter.
Okay. All right. So those are the basic things that any lender wants to know about, right? And it's all helps people, give them the idea that they can buy a home and they can live there and pay for it without having to, sacrifice other things, right?
Yep,
I
that's
mean,
correct.
they can live in the house and not have to eat, you know,
Yeah.
once a day.
Yeah. So the house, they call that house poor,
House
right?
poor. Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to make sure, yeah, right. And we basically want to make sure the person's not going to be stressed, and everybody's individual outcome, or everybody's individual circumstances are different. However, just because we have to follow guidelines to keep this under a conventional conforming loan or a FHA or VA rule loan, each set of loans have their own underwriting guidelines that we have to follow. The underwriter has to follow. They're not being jerks. There's about your your car payment, or they're not being jerks about the the whatever that you sold. They want to see the big transactions, that kind of thing, that are in your account, and know what the reason is, and saying, hey, is he buying using cash or pulling cash out to buy this or that every other day,
Right.
So a lot of people will get frustrated along the way, but just know that, hey, it's the underwriter does have our best interest in mind. They're on the same team.
Yep.
They just are trying to make sure that it meets those rules and requirements. So it's actually
they're the referee or the umpire,
right.
And
Yeah.
right. And just because you want to travel while you're playing basketball doesn't mean the referee, the umpire, is going to let you do that. Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So and it's protection for us too, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence as the lender, and you as the client want to pick a lender that's going to do that due diligence for you, so that nothing happens after the fact. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So, yeah. We want to make sure you're going to find the house that you like, and you're going to get to stay there as long as you want. That's the goal, right? It's not just to buy the house, it's to be able to stay in the home as long as you want to.
Correct.
Right. Without any issues, right? Financial. I mean, there's always going to be issues, but at least they're not from internal. All right.
That's right.
You can afford it.
Yeah. Do you mind if I talk through real quick just how, we're talking about individual cases. So here's some things that if you are in one of these categories, just know that there are going to be some additional requirements as far as documentation that we're going to ask for when you come to us for pre-approval. So you remember how I said income is stable and likely to continue. So if you're a self-employed client, or if you're a person that has, for instance, 1099 income, it is still possible to get a loan. It's just that we are going to ask for some additional documents. So for instance, for a 1099, we're going to want to see 2 years of 1099s, and then we're going to plug that into one of the guideline spreadsheets that says, hey, given all of the income, here's what we can use for your income number. So that's just an example. The other ones are if you are about to have a legal status change. So if you have a lawsuit, if you're being sued, if you're going to owe the government money for taxes, again, not a showstopper, but those are things that we need to know about up front so that we can start collecting that documentation. Divorce is another one. Bankruptcy is another one. And typically they're waiting timelines after the bankruptcy has been discharged. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but just know that if you're one of those categories, we still typically can get things done. And we have done plenty of deals. James, you and I have done plenty for people like that. And people have lives, and you know what I mean? We live life, and we have things that we take care of. So,
yeah, I mean, that's a great point. A lot of lenders, especially, the national name brands, they have one way of doing business. It's their way. And you fit in their square little box, you're good to go. But there's not too many people that I know that are perfect and fit in a square box, right? We come in all different shapes and sizes, and sometimes we're a round peg that doesn't fit in a square hole. So when you come into those situations, it's always best to get a second opinion from somebody like Aaron, who can really help get get people to overcome some of those obstacles, because
Right.
none of us live a perfect life, and that's the spice of life. That's the thing that people really, really factor in, and it's important.
Yep, for sure. And I would say that's also, being on this end of things, I see the difference every day in picking a lender like, myself or my team over a Rocket Mortgage or a very generic type cheapest rate, whatever. There's a reason it's the cheapest, because there's nobody that's helping you on the other end. So I'm not, I'm biased, obviously, but the whole difference is, hey, we're here for your individual circumstances. We're going to be your teammate, and we're going to be alongside you the whole way. You've got my phone number right there. It's one of those things where, obviously if I can't answer, or if I can't answer the text right away, I'll get to it when I can. But overall, you're going to get a responsive person who knows their stuff and is alongside you when you're advocate. And really, I think for a lender, that's what you want when you're buying your first home.
Well, let's talk about that just for a quick second. Sometimes the cheapest isn't always the best, right?
Correct.
The stuff that you get from the dollar store doesn't necessarily last beyond 30 days, as opposed to going to get a wrench from, Home Depot or Ace. You're going to get something that's going to last a lot longer than the one from the dollar store, right?
Yeah.
So if you want something that's dependable, that's going to be reliable, you might have to pay a little bit more for it. But at the end, you're going to save money because you don't have to buy two of them, right? And the hassle that we see every time somebody uses the wrong lender, the struggle is real, and it's just, there's no way around it. And when lenders aren't doing the right thing, that's when we get trouble at closing tables, right? And closings get delayed. I can't tell you how many times a closing gets delayed because a lender isn't paying attention and doing the right things. And a 1 hour closing ends up being 5 hours, or worse, it gets delayed from Friday to Monday. What are people supposed to do during that, weekend?
Yeah, there's stuff in the moving van outside the title company. You know what I mean? They're ready to go.
And
what
so
are you gonna do?
Don't ever close on a Friday on a 3-day weekend, because then you're really at a disadvantage.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
I'll just say to that, I don't want people to get the impression that we're adding all this premium. I have seen both sides, and I can tell you that our pricing is competitive as far as the interest rate, and our closing costs are all going to be competitive relative to the rest of the market. The difference is that you're going to get that guy like me, or the guy like Logan or Sly, the other people on our team that are in your corner. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And that's the best thing, is somebody that's accessible and reachable. I mean, you're not going to talk to 5 different people. You're going to talk to Aaron directly. Right. And that's the thing I always talk about, is like, look, if you want to use a local lender, that's who I recommend, because if something goes sideways and they give you the wrong answer, then I can reach out and choke them. Right.
Yeah.
So you can't do that to a 1-800 number. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just share a personal story real quick. My first home was, I was in the military, getting out of the military, and I went with a military type lender for my first home, not knowing anything else, just thinking, hey, these guys have got the best rates. They've taken care of me in the past. I'm going to use them. And it was not a good experience. It was, you would call on the phone, that 1-800 number. You would get a different person every time. Nobody knew where what your circumstances were. They didn't know where the file, your file and your information going through the system and the process. Nobody was keeping track of that. And the timeline was more like, hey, we'll tell you when it's all done and you can close. And it's like, hey, I'm out of the military. I'm moving with my family. Like we need a place to have our, put our stuff up, So it was, so the difference is with the lender, you're going to get, a personal lender, you're going to get a timeline, hopefully you're going to get that, high probability to close on the same day, assuming we get all the documentation and stuff. And I won't say I'm perfect, right? Like you and I have had 1 or 2 of those 5-hour closings too. And we hate to do it. We don't, that is never the plan, and we will mitigate that in every way that we can. But I would say that that's the vast minority of the loans that we actually get done.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, Aaron, thanks. It's been a great episode. We're about 30 minutes, and I appreciate your time. This has been great. Hopefully, you can join us again for another episode, and we can dive more into some new topics.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for hosting me.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Aaron. If you've enjoyed this, you thought this was useful, we'd really like to have you come back and see more. And we're going to be doing a lot more of this. So we want to tell your friends. And our channel is the Tiernan Group Vid, right? Tiernan Group Vid. That's our YouTube handle now. And I'm looking forward to seeing more. And we're going to be doing more of these more frequently. So
yeah,
have a great day, Aaron.
Yeah, you too. I'll put in a little plug. I make sure you subscribe. James puts out some awesome stuff. I watch it and I learn a lot every now and then too. So, all right. Take care.
Thanks.
Yep.